In case we get some password, what's your password? No, mine is inside. Okay. 99712.
In the United States. That's a hard question. Now, I'd love to see the young people in the room. I think that the young people got to realize you're not going to be, I was young one time. I mean, I used to call what they call hip hop. That was me. But you know what happened? Eventually, the heritage grade, let the CIA go. CIA?
Excuse me, Mama. Excuse me.
I think you don't like what I got to say. That's what I think. I may have a problem when I get outside. They just knock on my door. Say, we didn't like what you had to say. But I think what I'm more interested in, I think this is a really positive gathering. It's always important to bring people together to encourage us. That's important. But it also needs to be a meeting of about 25 people, not 100, 25 maximum. The half of them need to be women. A third of them need to be young people. You know, I'm talking what it needs to look like. The whole need to be looking like that. Africans tend to like to have people with only the men are talking. You know, you gotta know how to go. But this don't need to be half women, having some young, some old, some are scholars, some are grassroots organizers, coming up with a strategy really to move the ball forward. What do you want to do about Uganda is the question. What do you want to do about Uganda is the question. So if you want to do such a meeting, call me. I'm ready to work with you. I don't have much more to say. I was in Nigeria 2 months ago for the Global African Diaspora Summit. Global African Diaspora Summit. And 60 countries were represented at that conference in Abuja. The follow-up conference is committed to be in Uganda in 2024. I don't know if you guys know that. Your minister for diaspora or whatever stood up and said, Uganda's got to hold the next summit. So I'm thinking I'm going to be in Uganda in 2024, if not before. You know, I don't even know who your ambassador to Washington is.
The president is coming
I don't know who
soon.
your ambassador is. I met the previous ambassador somewhere at a reception. Uganda got to do a better job of engaging America.
Yeah.
He's the ambassador. The people ambassador. I'm talking about the one that they said don't come tell on the contact list, drive a big car, and
Yeah, those are fake.
this guy's not straight up to do that. I need the ambassador.
Yeah, those are all fake.
So, I will leave you with the fact that don't agonize, organize. You know?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm happy to be here. It's always good to see Bob Ryan. He's one of the more decent human beings I know. And he's a very nice guy. We were together in Baltimore at the State of the Black World Summit. And Ron Daniels is in the building, but I'm in another meeting right now. So Ron is running that building. He'll be back now. You'll see him. But Bobby came and was really among the people. You know, it wasn't like he was. He does. He's the right guy. And I think one day he will be president of Uganda. How about the head of the African Union? We think which would be better.
Yes.
The guy we got over there now,
Uganda first.
we need an AU chairperson who stands up and gets stuff done. I'm looking for African leaders who are ready to lead, not just talk about it, not just get mad. You know, I want African leaders who are going to lead. And my message to the young people, we need more Nelson Mandelas out here. We really do. We need more We're gonna solve the problem. The problem with Uganda is not limited to Uganda. The problem with Uganda is limited to black people. And I don't care where you are in the world, you got the same problem that you guys are arguing about with Mussolini and how we got all kinds of problems here with our leadership. So we need Ugandan people to grow up and commit themselves to real leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Melvin, for talking to us about the advocacy for change and we in the diaspora can effectively make this positive change. I just want to make an announcement before I introduce the next speakers. We do have a 2K run tomorrow. So if you're like Usain Bolt, or you're like the Jamaican sprint, please be ready to be out in the morning, and I think there's an award if you're in the top 5. So let's be ready tomorrow at 8 in the morning. The next speakers will be talking about human rights in Uganda, combating torture and supporting survivors, and it's the role of the task, featuring Andrea Barron and Joanne Godetta. Andrea Barron has led task advocacy and outreach program since November 2013. She passionately works with survivors to advocate for human rights policies, particularly those in towards countries whose governments have perpetrated torture. Andrea plays a pivotal role in educating policymakers and the public on issues affecting survivors, including the affirmative asylum backlog. Andrea holds a master's degree in history from Boston College and has completed doctoral courses in government at the University of Maryland, College Park. She was an adjunct professor of history at George Mason University from 1999 to 2015. On the other hand, Joanne is a dedicated lawyer, has been a driving force in TASK's efforts to combat torture in Uganda. A graduate of Georgetown Law School, she served as legal and international counsel at TASK until recently. At TASK, Joanne represented torture survivors in the asylum proceedings and coordinated efforts to expand public awareness of torture and hold perpetrators accountable to the actions internationally. Her profound legal expertise and advocacy have contributed significantly to supporting survivors and seeking justice for victims of torture. Please let's welcome the 2 wonderful speakers.
Hello everyone. My name is Andrea Barrett. I'm the Advocacy Program Manager at TASK, the Torture, Abolition, and Survivors Support Coalition. It's a long name. And we just call it the Torture, Abolition Coalition. And we're going to divide our presentation into 3 parts. I'm going to speak for 5 or 6 minutes about TASK and our mission. And then Joanne is going to speak for around 15 minutes about our report on torture in Uganda. And then I'm going to talk about U.S. policy on Uganda, focusing more on Congress and what I see as a way to press the Biden administration and Congress to move beyond rhetorical condemnation of the Museveni regime. You all might not like my ideas, but I'm going to tell you what they are.
Would we have a question and answer?
Yeah. Okay, so TASK was founded in 1998 by Sister Diana Ortiz and Ursuline Nunn, who was tortured and raped by the Guatemalan military in 1989, at a time when the U.S. supported the country's right-wing military. Most were persecuted because they were political activists in their country. Our legal department has 2 immigration attorneys and a paralegal with expertise in asylum law. The overwhelming majority of our survivors are affirmative asylum seekers, and we have a small number of defensive cases. Social services help survivors build on their strengths to develop a path to reach their goals, including their career objectives. The mental health program helps them cope with multiple traumas and losses in a safe, caring, and confidential environment. I'm going to focus now on the advocacy program, which I lead. Because TASC is founded as an advocacy organization to combat torture, and because we're only 20 minutes away from the U.S. Congress and the White House, we're located very close to Catholic University in D.C. Northeast. We're uniquely positioned to work with survivors in advocating for policies that matter to them. The advocacy program is national and also has some international components. So I work with both survivors in the DC area, and since the pandemic, we started working on Zoom with people all over the country, including a few Ugandans. A few people, most of them are from New York, New Jersey, California, and Illinois. Is anybody here from Massachusetts?
Yeah.
So that's my home state, Boston Storm. We use 3 criteria to decide what issues to work on. What policy issues do survivors care about? How can we have an impact? And what is our capacity to achieve a specific goal? During my first years of TASC, we concentrated on human rights abuses in the countries survivors are from. Mostly Ethiopia, Cameroon, and Eritrea, a few from Sudan and Uganda. In the last 2 years, we dedicated most of our time to our affirmative asylum justice campaign. Some of you might be aware there are thousands of asylum applicants, over 180,000, who are affirmative, which means they entered the U.S. legally with visas, and they waited as long as 7 years for an interview with the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Does anybody know about this?
Yeah.
These are not the people who cross the border. These are people who entered legally with visas and can't get an interview. People know about this?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so if you have this, apart from my regular speech, if you know anyone waiting more than 5 years for an interview, affirmative, they can email me at Andrea@task.org and let me know. I particularly need some people from Massachusetts because the job that we're foreign, and I want you to get with us until I find some Massachusetts people. But wherever you're from, only waiting over more than 5 years. Okay? Please. So, up until the TASC launched our campaign in 2021, the Congress in New York City and California, nobody paid attention to these people.
Yeah.
They suffered tremendously because of forced family separation, psychological trauma, fear of being sent back to their country. They have a well-founded fear of future persecution. They include torture survivors, rape victims, and persecuted members of the LGBT community. How does TASC advocacy work? We prepare survivors to meet with congressional aides in person or over Zoom to share their stories. Before the pandemic, we had about 70 congressional meetings a year. Of course, you all know these are not with actual members of Congress. They're with the aides, but the aides help make policy. So if you set up your meetings, don't feel badly if you can't meet with a representative of the senator. Most people don't. So we have, now this year we only had 50 because of the pandemic, and next year hopefully we're back to 70. Our biggest success so far has been a letter on July 27th from 61 members of the House of Representatives sent to Burjadu, who never heard her name before. She is the director of USCIS and Homeland Security Mayorkas. And what we're trying to do is move all affirmative asylum seekers waiting more than 5 years to the front of the line. That's what we want. Now, this doesn't mean, but I wasn't sure how many people here follow that issue about affirmative asylum seekers, because I know a lot of you are immigrants and you been here a while. This doesn't mean that USCIS has to listen to them, but it's a big deal when you have 61 members of Congress. So we're bragging because Amnesty International gets those kind of numbers on their letters. They're a tiny little organization. So the torture survivors, me, my interns, so we're very proud to love these 61 names of people. Thank you. We work very, very hard. So, of course, now we're trying to get a single letter of consent. Okay, so I think this is the part where I'm going to conclude my introduction to TASK. Now I'm going to introduce Joanne Getter, who's going to speak about torture in Uganda. She was a volunteer at TASK, but she's a volunteer lawyer, and she works much harder than many people paid for 40 hours a week.
Well, good afternoon. I am so honored to be here. You know, those years that I was working, it was behind the desk, with a computer screen in front of me, sitting in my chair, working on these human rights issues in Africa, especially Uganda. To be with you, who have lived experiences that have seen the impacts of persecution and torture, whether it's personally, or with family, or friends, or political colleagues. It's so meaningful for me to be here, and again, I really am honored. My work at TASK first involved, as I think Andrea mentioned, representing dozens of torture survivors in the asylum office and the immigration court, and we struggled together to get asylum for them. There's a terrible irony about TASK asylum seekers. On one hand, we're usually successful. But on the other hand, the reason we're successful is because our TASK members have truly suffered such terrible, horrendous persecution that their stories can't be denied. Now, my role was just to document their experience, put it into a legal framework, and guide them through a very complicated legal administrative process. It was incredibly rewarding, okay, sure, to secure a life in the United States, one survivor at a time. But after a while, our then director, Lenos Mignana, asked me to launch an effort where success can make such a bigger difference, but where the risk of failure is also much bigger. And that is in attempting to hold perpetrators of torture and persecution accountable for their brutality. Now, when successes happen, it's spectacular. They can be punished financially, publicly vilified, they can be pariahs, in prison. It would send a strong signal to others as well, and probably deter them. Why is this so great? Frankly, it's because also we have in the United States are holding these individuals accountable are totally inadequate. One of them is the Torture Victim Protection Act. On paper, it looks great. Survivors tortured in the United States and sue in federal court against the perpetrator. But those victories, when they happen, are hollow. Because unless that perpetrator has ties to the United States, and more importantly, assets in the United States that can be taken to pay damages, it doesn't really amount to much. TASK, we tried to identify some of these perpetrators. We certainly had any number of torture survivors who could have claimed in those cases, but we just couldn't find the perpetrators that had the assets in the United States. So that really didn't work for us, and frankly, it rarely works for others. Second, cases get brought to the International Criminal Court, and I'm not going to talk about this because we have a man here, Bruce Efron, who has done work that I admire beyond measure. We lawyers, we talk about evidence and we talk about argument. And this is the strongest evidence, the most powerful legal argument that could possibly be mounted. And all I can do is hope and pray that there is success in the end. Finally, there's the use of global Magnitsky sanctions against persecutors, excuse me. And here's where TASK has made very, very concerted effort over a number of years. And Andrea and I have personally worked very hard to build strong cases. Now, for reasons I'll explain, we can't talk about the specifics of our work, but this This much I can say. We've submitted voluminous and I think ironclad evidence of the kind of serious human rights violations that the Global Magnitsky Act is supposed to correct. And we've submitted, by the way, not just to the U.S. State Department, but also to the sanctions enforcement agencies in the United Kingdom and the European Union. If all three of those governments agree to sanction, it can be the most powerful deterrent. Does it ever happen? Very rarely. Now, when a human rights group like TASC does submit a sanctions petition, it's not like a court case, it was a public record. We submit, and we have no idea what happens to it. It goes to the State Department, and they do their work, and we never hear back from them. And we look every week to see if one of our perpetrators has been sanctioned. Now that confidentiality is frustrating, but it makes good sense because obviously don't want to tip off our perpetrators on, hey, we're going after you, so they can then take their assets out of the United States and move them to their home country or Russia or China or somewhere where human rights violations are just not. And also, we need to protect the safety of the brave individuals who gave evidence to us. Well, this means we never know the outcome of our cases. In Uganda, we know, for example, that Abel Kandiho was sanctioned.
Yeah.
All over a year ago, I think.
Yeah.
May or may not have played a role in that, we will never know. Now, it's interesting because the United States and the United Kingdom and the European Union, especially around the 2021 elections, have all come out and made statements condemning the human rights abuses that occurred around that election. But sanctions have not happened, except, I guess, that's the one instance that I just mentioned. Now, Andrea's insight into U.S. foreign and military ties to Uganda and others, I'm sure, both spoken about those today with you or a little later. Give hints into why sanctions against U-70 henchmen have not taken place, even when they should, if they were based genuinely on the human rights violation themselves. So how can we, at least at TASC, hold perpetrators accountable, given that there are few legal avenues to do so? In the end, we looked to the court of public opinion, and that's the route that we took. All the evidence that we had, and the result was our comprehensive report on torture in Uganda. The report first summarized a long, tragic history, for 50 years history, of the widespread use of torture by any number of Uganda's leaders. It describes the physical and psychological impact the trauma of torture can have on its victims. And it counters directly the government argument that there are already avenues in Uganda for holding human rights violators accountable just within the system already. Then the real focus of the report was its absolutely unsparing, detailed account of the regime's brazen, and I mean brazen, use of torture to keep its hold on power since 2017. For this, we relied on many sources, the accounts of human rights organizations that are on the ground in Africa, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch in particular, the international press, and the BBC and Al Jazeera, I can say, have done a somewhat credible job. The U.S. press has woefully fallen short. Public accounts by prominent Ugandan members of parliament, candidates, authors. But most importantly, we relied on the information that we got from the people we call our brave citizen journalists. And they came to us as a result of, and young people in this audience, I think, probably appreciate this more than I can, a secure online reporting platform that TASC established. And we used social media and word of mouth to get the information out. And the purpose of that was to collect information about torture and persecution in Uganda. And within 2 months, we received online reports of unlawful imprisonment, torture, other abuses, over 100 Ugandan citizens. And it wasn't even a well-publicized avenue for reporting. From those, we took the testimony of 22 of those reporters who were willing to sit down with us and patiently and courageously describe the most unimaginable experiences in anyone's life. So with this rich and tragic information, we did our report on what is a systematic, and I emphasize systematic, use of torture and other serious human rights abuses in Uganda. The first of those was police attacks at public events. Now, some of these are so well known, I don't have to talk about the details. The 2017 attacks on members of parliament resulted in the arrest and torture of Bobby Wine and others. The 2018 attacks at, before, and after a political rally in Aruba. The second set of systematic violations we found were attacks on journalists, especially intense persecution of journalists during and after the 2021 presidential campaign. 2 journalists were badly beaten just for reporting during the campaign. Many were kept away by force from public polling places on election day, and 20 were physically attacked by police, covering Bobby Wine's filing of a complaint at the Kampala UN office. 4 of them were hospitalized with serious injuries. And then the third and largest category that we looked at was police violence against ordinary citizens. And we looked at 2 groups, UDP and other opposition group activists and supporters, and gay and lesbian Ugandans. Now, hundreds had entered, as I said, these are their experiences in our online reporting system, and 20 of those their stories ended up in the report. About half of the individuals that we talked to and included in the report wanted their names to be in that report. They were willing to take the risk that in a public report, they could be exposed and then persecuted once again simply for working with us on the report. Another half, and typically those who are individuals with families and children, perfectly legitimately asked that their works be anonymously reported, and we of course honored that. Now, I wish there was time to tell everyone their stories, and obviously there isn't, but these are ordinary citizens. They're just living their lives. They're just exercising the most simple rights that we in this country take for granted, of speech and assembly and association. And everyone that talked to us was either arrested, detained, tortured, their families threatened, a few were even disappeared. And all they were doing was attending rallies, standing on a street corner wearing a pro-UDP t-shirt, walking home from work after spending the day working at the polls, dragged out of bed in the middle of the night. And that's story after story after story. In the end, the report was published in mid-2021, submitted to the African Union Commission on Human Rights. Since then, it has on the TEST website been downloaded over 400 times and has been viewed more than 25,000 times. And if you haven't seen it, please take a look. Its results were widely reported in Uganda and in a number of other African countries and their press outlets. Sadly, it got very little coverage in the United States. Human rights abuses in Africa never get the attention that they deserve. But we also know, and this was especially important to me as an old asylum attorney, that asylum attorneys across the country would use this report as part of their evidence in the asylum cases that they brought forward for their Ugandan clients. They must include evidence in those evidence packets of such dangerous country conditions in the individual's home country that they could not return home safely. And our reports certainly demonstrated that. And then finally, I'll just note, at the time of the report, after the report was published, the regime continues its autocratic hold on Uganda. with no election campaigns in the last year, it seems that those human rights abuses may have tamped down a little bit. Maybe it was the sanctions against Candido, maybe the pending ICC case has chastened Museveni and his henchmen. Perhaps it's just easing up and waiting for the next election campaign. And then just a few months ago, I was shocked. Museveni announced that his government was throwing out the UN Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights from Uganda. And why? He said that, well, and I quote, while there were some mistakes in handling people when they were being arrested, he corrected those mistakes. Does anyone in this room believe that statement? I certainly don't. But please, please know that there are those of us here in DC, especially Andrea and her colleagues at TASC, who will keep the faith with the Ugandan people. And I'll be with her all the way. And I've talked a lot about the limitations and kind of the bad news and how much we can accomplish in keeping perpetrators accountable. But we all obviously have to keep trying. We will, and I know all of you will too. Thank you so much for letting me take up all this.
Hi, before I start, I want to welcome Amy Tavia, and you back there. That's Amy want to stand up as Executive Director of TASC. He's a torture survivor from Sudan. So here's somebody else from another African country here in solidarity with the Ugandans. And he's my boss, so be nice to him. So what I'm going to talk about is going to be a little controversial. I seem like the kind of person who will talk about something controversial. Yes, I do. And with the title, I'm going to begin with something that's not controversial. It's called Moving Beyond Rhetorical Condemnation. So, we know that torture carried out in so-called safe houses, forced disappearances, rape, have been going on continuously under the brutal regime of Yoweri Museveni. Every year, the U.S. State Department, in its human rights reports, documents these actions: intimidation of journalists, attacks against Museveni's political opponents, murder, corruption, criminalization of same-sex and consensual sexual conduct. Year after year, this rhetorical condemnation continues. That means a lot of talk, right? Yeah. My first experience with a torture survivor from Uganda was in 2019. When I helped set up meetings for Member of Parliament Betty Nambu's in the U.S. Congress and accompanied her on these visits. I had read about how she was attacked in Parliament in 2017 by Museveni's thugs, breaking her back. I walked with her through the tunnels in Congress, in meetings with 2 members of Congress. It reminded me of when I used to escort my 80-year-old mother, who just had a few minor aches. Betty was suffering tremendously, but she never complained, not even once. But at the same time, we read these State Department human rights reports, we kept hearing about how the U.S. did not want to alienate Museveni because Uganda boasts the largest number of refugees in Africa, now 1.5 million, and of course because of its contribution to the African Union's mission in Somalia, now the African Union's transition mission in Somalia. The aid kept flowing to Uganda regardless of how many egregious human rights abuses were carried out. But then something changed in February of 2014. That was when Uganda passed the first infamous Anti-Homosexuality Act. This is where some of the controversial stuff comes in. Okay. The act mandated life imprisonment for gay sex, 7 years in prison for, quote, attempting to commit homosexuality, and 5 to 7 years in jail, and a $4,000 fine for, quote, promotion of homosexuality. The Obama administration decided Uganda needed to be sanctioned, even though it was considered a generous host for refugees and a reliable counter-terrorist partner in Somalia. After the law was signed, Obama told Museveni that this law would, quote, complicate our valued relationship with Uganda